feeling. It's all right. This happened once
Welcome
before.
to This Happened Once Before podcast, a conversation between generational Phish fans. I'm your host, Bill, and this week I connect with the father and son duo behind the popular Phish Phry podcast, Bobby and Oliver. They were nice enough to agree to come on after I heard their podcast and the amazing journey they are taking together. I highly recommend you check out their podcast and their unique perspective on the music. This week we discuss how this father and son started their musical adventure, what they thought of their first live experience, and then dive into a rare one-set show for the band, opening for Santana on July 25th, 1992, from the Stowe Performing Arts Center, Stowe, Vermont. On this week's episode of This Happened Once Before, I will share my thoughts on Bobby and Oliver's show suggestions before next week's episode. In last week's episode, Noah recommended the June 30th, 2019 show from Camden, New Jersey. One of the more rewarding aspects of this podcast has been listening to these great shows that I would not have found on my own. I reconnected with the band in 2019 after having not seen them live for almost a decade. And this one shows them getting back into their stride that really, in my opinion, hasn't left them since. A great curtain width paired with an early Fast Enough For You gets the show rolling. Followed by some first set highlights, including a camel walk with what sounded like a Jimi Hendrix machine gun back and forth, a run of songs that I imagined paired really nicely with the setting summer sun of Pebbles and Marbles, Tila, and the Mango song. And then the first set closer of David Bowie turning ferocious at the 7:30 mark and really not looking back until the end. The band maintained that energy from the Bowie into the second set with an incredible Mr. Completely opener that clicks around the 10-minute mark and gets into this swing sound that gets far from where they started but lands nicely into a soaring finish. Next up, 20 years later, then provides them an avenue to show their improvisational chops in the other direction. An open, spacey jam oozes from the song, providing a juxtaposition to the prior Mr. Completely. Into a fiery brief, Big Black Furry Creatures from Mars, segueing beautifully into a tight tweezer. To me, the first 53 minutes of the second set is an excellent encapsulation of their talents. A very solid Most Events Aren't Planned into a fun finishing run of Makisupa through Susie really ends the show nicely and shows where the band could be in the summer of 2019. But wait, there's more. When you see that Punch You in the Eye shows up in the encore, you have to stop and stare and notice that this is no half-assed version either. You know, traditionally a harbinger of a great show to come in the opening spot. This encore version brings the same kind of heat that, you know, I've grown accustomed to of hearing that song open up a show. Followed by What's the Use in the encore. I mean, enough said there. And finally, a Rockin' Julius to send everyone home smiling and shaking their heads. So thank you, Noah, for this great show suggestion. And I would not have crossed paths with this show otherwise, but really glad I did. To me, it felt like a perfect encapsulation of the band getting ready to launch to where they are at their current levels today. A really great listen. Enjoy this week's episode as we talk about Phish's show from July 25th, 1992, opening for Santana at the Stowe Performing Arts Center, Stowe, Vermont, on this week's episode of This Happened Once Before.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to be a guest on an upcoming episode or recommend a show for a future podcast, contact me at This Happened Once Before podcast on Facebook, at THOB podcast on Instagram, or at happenedoncebefore@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and I hope this happens once again.
Feeling. It's all right. This happened once before. I'm fine. I'm fine.
Welcome to another episode of This Happened Once Before, a podcast between generational Phish fans, where I have a conversation with folks who got into Phish, and we talk about how they found the band and what they love most about it. And then we talk about a show from the bygone era of 1988 to 1996. Today, I am very lucky to have with me some folks who have some of you may know, and some of you will definitely know them very well after this, because they also are in this world of celebrating Phish through the medium of a podcast. And I had to reach out to them once I heard their podcast because of not only of how they're attacking it, but who both of these people are and their individuality. So without any further ado, who am I lucky to have with me today?
Well, I'm Bobby Shirley.
I'm Oliver.
And what's the name of that podcast?
So we are the co-hosts of the Phish Phry podcast. And what we're doing is we're relatively new fans, relatively new deep fans.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about Phish as we learn them. And so we just finished our season 1, and that was all listening to all the studio albums from oldest to newest, and that was a lot of fun. In season 2, we're diving into live shows. So this your podcast, which I love, by the way, and also thank you so much for having us on.
Please, my pleasure.
But I love the premise of your podcast because we're kind of like, we're Phish newbies and we're looking for that Phish Sherpa, and so our season 2 is we're talking to people that have been Phish fans longer. And so, I mean, you're probably one of the oldest Phish fans we've met. And so we're super pumped to be here and talk about Phish and these old shows. So
thank you. Yeah, that felt good and hurt at the same time when you said that, Bobby, about being, but I'll take it. I understand. Yeah, no, I understand. No, completely. So, and I think that's the avenue that you took collectively with season 1, right? And I thought that was a really interesting way to do it, because as you got into season 2, I think the analogy of peeling the onion is kind of what I use, is that this world is enormous, right? So whose idea was it to start with the studio stuff?
So I think originally it was my idea.
Yeah.
Because that's listening to like the Phish playlists on Apple Music. They had basically a studio playlist and then like a live one. Or a live playlist. And so we started with listening to that. And then one day me and Oliver were like just talking about Phish, because that's what we were constantly doing. And I said, would you want to record this and like do a podcast where we're talking about Phish? And I honestly was surprised, because he was like, yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah.
Were you scared though?
Yeah, I was nervous the first episode.
Yeah.
I didn't even talk like most of it.
So
me too, though. That's not exclusive to you, just so you know, right? Like that, me too. We talked about this before we started recording about, putting yourself out there, and you've done a great job. If I had that kind of confidence that however young man you are, I would, I can only wish I had it now at 49. You put it out there, and to your point, I think it's okay, like, to hear yourself get better. Right? I hope you don't feel that way anymore, do you?
Not really.
Yeah, exactly. So that's great. So the studio albums, you jump into there. Now, does that start accelerating the love?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, at least, like that Phish playlist that we started with, it was like the hits. You know what I'm saying? Like a real good sample from all the albums. And so for us, like digging into listening studio album track 1 all the way through, it really gave us more depth. And then at the same time we're doing this, I'm listening widely, to live shows. And so it's cool to hear the studio version. And then now, we've been to a couple of Phish shows, and to be able to hear the expandedness of the studio track, basically, and just where is it going to take us? And so it did deepen the love, but it was kind of like dangling a carrot before a donkey. Like there's more out there, and I'm going to find it. And then it seems like when you get a little taste of it, then there's another show,
Yeah.
and then there's a new album. Oh, another album coming out, and then you listen to to that one. And so it's been really, really fun.
And it's a really interesting. Okay, go ahead, Oliver.
It's been a big journey.
Yeah? In what way? What do you mean by that?
Like, there's been so many Phish fans joining along, and like they've been helping us understand more about it. So yeah.
Very cool. What do you think then, because listening to it and absorbing it in chronological order, right? So you're hearing them from this college band to grown men, right?
Yeah.
Adults with families and children and real world issues. So what did you take away from that experience as far as that evolution?
Like how much they've grown. Like
Yeah.
they've taken like these songs with tiny little jams and then taking them into like 30-minute tweezers.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because it was my fault, but we started with Junto instead of the white tapes.
Okay.
So we started with Junto, went all the way through to Sigma Oasis, and then one of our somebody on, I think it was on Instagram, messages and said, "Hey, I think you forgot the white tapes." So I went back and looked, and I was like, "We absolutely forgot it." I don't know how I overlooked it, but somehow we overlooked it. So we went back. So I find it fascinating going from Sigma Oasis, their newest studio album, as of today, going back to their very first demo tapes with the white tapes, and just hearing
How much they've grown.
how much they've grown.
Yeah.
Was like, in some ways it was mind-boggling, because by the time we got to Sigma Oasis, we'd recorded like 20 episodes or something, and just to hear their growth in it was wild. But you can, I told Oliver, I said, but you can hear current Phish inside of the white tape.
Yeah.
Like it's
In what way?
there, like it's there in seed form. The one of the things I love about Phish is they take their music and their craft seriously, but they don't take themselves seriously. They're there to have a good time, to give their audience and the fans they love a good time, but they're not serious about themselves in that sense. Like if Trey hits a wrong note or Fishman messes up while playing a fill, they just roll with it. You know what I'm saying? Or maybe in that mistake, it leads them into something else that they might not have gotten to otherwise. And so in that sense, and you can hear the humor and the lightheartedness in those white tapes. And then you can hear the craft and the skill of 30 plus years in Sigma Oasis. And so to see that, and you still know, because like, what was it? In Fuego, they have Wombat, which to me is one of the silliest songs they've had in recent years. But they're not taking themselves seriously. They're just trying to have a good time and make sure their fans do. And so I think that's seeing that evolution. But I mean, you can listen to those white tapes, and there's some serious musicianship on those.
Sure. I mean, they're studying it, right? As students, they're studying as to be musicians or composers in Trey's case, right? So, right. That seed is there to grow to these amazing 45-minute Ruby Waves and things like that are now part of the current repertoire.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Is there, how many times do you find yourself listening to the album before doing a podcast? Like how many times did you run through it?
There's like 2 weeks, so like probably about I don't know, because like each time we listen to it like different amount of times, so it's either around 5 times or like it's 5 or 10.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Wow. So you get a really good sense of what you're in for.
I think for me, Oliver has school during the school year. But with my job, I can, I do digital marketing, so I can sit and just listen all day. So I'll generally have whatever album we're going to be reviewing, it'll be on repeat, and I'll listen to it at least 10 times. And because I'm trying to study more, because I want to be able to develop my critical ear and understand the way they're playing, why they're playing, how they're playing. And part of that is so I can help educate Oliver and let him help him understand what I'm hearing and why I think they're doing it and what it is I like about this jam. You know what I'm saying? So for me, I think I have the luxury of being able to listen to it more.
Sure.
And sometimes, I mean, there's been times because Oliver's in 4th grade, he plays lots of sports, and so he has lots of extracurriculars. We have 4 kids in our family total. So sometimes he don't get the chance to listen to it as much as I would like for them to, or as much as I feel like maybe we should,
Yeah.
to be able to present the best review we can. But that's life. But
And it is hard to kind of listen to all the songs in like
Yeah.
few days
Yeah.
or weeks. And so it's like hard.
Yep. And so,
Yeah, for sure.
but so like a lot of times I'll send Oliver a text, or I'll tell him in the morning, like, make sure you listen to, this album. Try to listen to some of it sometime today. And then he does. He's great about it. He loves listening, but it's just hard because
Yeah, I mean, when you got that much, you are a young man who should be doing a lot of different things, right?
Absolutely.
And that is how you become a better, more well-rounded person in this world, right? And the people who you've interacted with in this world, right, in the podcasting Phish world, are probably very different from the people you play sports with and the people you go to school with, and that's the best part about being young, is that a lot of times as we get older, our world shrinks and we don't have these interactions that you have so regularly as a younger person. But Phish shows are one of those places. And that's been something lately we've been talking about, is that like there's very few public squares, for lack of a better word, where groups of people get together for their like-minded things. And
Absolutely.
Phish concerts, regardless whether you're in 4th grade or 49, is a place where we can all get together and have a blast. I told this story, I think it was Reed's, where there was these really small kids with their parents in front of us, and they were writing song requests on balloons and hitting them up to the stage. And I was like, man, this scene has definitely changed since I first came on board, but all for the better.
Yeah.
So what's the biggest difference of opinion the two of you have about Phish?
Ooh, that's a tough question.
I can't imagine you agree on everything Phish does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you mean exactly that we differ? Have
Yes.
different? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, I have one.
Go.
I like studio albums.
Oh. Yep. I think that's probably where we differ.
Yeah.
While I like the studio albums, and they do have their place, I've been probably since I really got deep into it a year and a half ago now, way more a live show guy.
Yeah.
And so I think that's probably the biggest difference we have.
Yeah.
And that's the time bandwidth thing too, probably, right? Where we just said, Oliver, you got all that on your plate. You got all the stuff to do. It's hard for you to want to, 3 hours for one concert versus 45 minutes for one album, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a good one, because I think too, to that point, Oliver, is that, and Bobby, you said this about Sigma Oasis, is that the quality of the studio albums and not just sonically because they're recorded in better places with better equipment, but to listen to them, Sigma Oasis has a lot of good headphone songs, right? Like where you can hear a lot of cool stuff happening. So that's a really great way to come about it, Oliver, right? Because I think time, and it's not like you're not listening to Phish. It's just the other version, right? And I think that's a great way to do it in a when you don't have a lot of time to do it.
Yeah.
So I know you had just said you've been to a couple shows. So when was the first show you've been to? Because if anybody hasn't heard the story of Oliver's first show, they're going to hear it today, because I love it, and I'm going to ask you to tell it again. But so it sounds like you've been to a couple, right? And how many have you been to so far total?
So we, as a family, have been to 2.
Okay.
I've been to 1.
Okay.
I've been to 2, but he's only been to.
Yeah. Bob listened to it, so it was good.
It was good.
So now, Bobby, was that Oliver's first show and your first show the same show, or did you go like a night before?
Nope. His first night was my first night.
What an amazing experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was. Tell him about it.
Okay, so if y'all haven't already heard, so we came in, it was like very hot.
Tell him where it was.
It was at the amphitheater in Huntsville, Alabama. And we walk in, it was very hot and very in our eyes, but then the sun went down, and we got mentioned on Phish's story when we were traveling there. And then they opened with Blaze On.
Wait.
Yeah, I think you're burying the lead here, sir.
You got to tell him about when we're walking in.
Who were you shaking hands with on the way in?
Oh yeah, we met Trey.
Oh yeah, we met Trey. I love it. I would love to read you what I did over my summer story that you brought back, because you're burying the best part, right? Like, unless the Blaze On was the best part, meeting Trey, but I gotta think that had to be pretty cool, no?
Yeah, now my elf gave me an ornament that had it. And I didn't know you wanted me to say it.
Oh yeah. He wanted to hear and wants his podcast to hear about you meeting Trey.
Oh yeah.
I don't think anybody has a more, and I'm sure people do.
Yeah.
But let me put it this way, the way your dad said about an old Phish fan. I've never met anybody who's had such a cool first show experience of being able to meet some of the people who are going to be up on stage. I mean, that's really cool, man. That's really cool. Were you starstruck? Like, what? Tell me a little bit about what you talked about.
Okay, so we didn't really get to talk about much, but like he came up and I started waving at him, and then he was like, "Come shake my hand," and so I shook his hand. I was like, "Oh my gosh, actually Trey." And then my dad just starts talking to him and like thanking him for being here, and then he's like, "Thanks us." And then once we go on, I'm like, "That's crazy." And then we got mentioned on Phish's story, which was awesome.
Correct.
Very cool. So now that you get in, the sun goes down, because I know that feeling at those summer shows, and I can't even imagine in Huntsville, Alabama, what that must feel like. In, was it July?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
after my birthday, but that was like the best birthday present ever.
You and I share our birthdays are pretty close to each other, buddy. So when I heard that, I was like, that's a pretty good birthday present right there. So so what was the highlights for you guys that first show together?
Obviously met Trey.
Yeah.
You really? Because you forgot about it before. Nah, I had to remind you about it.
Totally forgot about that first.
Yeah.
You mentioned.
Yeah, that was cool.
Traveling there, which was fun.
Yeah.
What'd you like about that? What'd you like about getting there?
Okay, so we were playing Divided Sky, which was fun, and then it actually looked in the sky like a divided sky. And we played all the songs that we thought they were gonna play, and Blaze On was one of them, and they opened with it, and so we were just crazy.
Yeah.
Was that the song you wanted to hear most?
Yeah. Or Phry was, but then that was one of them.
Yeah. Oliver, on the podcast where we talk about it on our show, he had like a laundry list of songs that he wanted to hear.
Of course.
Which I did too, but I was like, I'm just gonna enjoy whatever they put before me.
Yeah, I do too.
Now I have songs that I would consider that I'm chasing, but so really it was like, who knows what they're gonna play, but I kind of put together a playlist and we just sampled songs all the way, because about an hour drive. And so just trying to see what was gonna happen. We had no idea, no real frame of reference for it, because it's both of our first show.
The fourth thing was like everybody around us was so nice.
Yes.
And like it was crazy.
Yep.
We got some more followers, which was fun.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
The way everybody that sat around us was extremely nice.
Exactly.
And obviously we were still riding on a high from getting before, and just being there, and some guy sat close to us. I don't remember exactly where he was from, but he'd been to like 30 plus shows and was like, "You guys are in for a great night." Oliver got to tell him that he met Trey.
Yeah.
And the guy was like, "I've been seeing Phish for about 30 years and I've never met Trey." He's like, "Little dude, you've peaked."
It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough going forward now to show number 2. And you're gonna wait for Paige or something like that. Now you're gonna get one at every show. And what's cool is that I think you had alluded to this on your show, and I know I'd read it in other places, is that that venue is new. The band really likes it, and mentioned that they do like it. And you mentioned how positive the experience was there, and the welcoming of Huntsville for that.
It's a brand new venue. Like, this is the end of their second season of shows. So for Phish to come play there, 8,000 seats.
Yeah.
That's a small place too. Yeah.
it looks like a little Greek in LA.
Mm-hmm. So it's a little lax atmosphere.
Uh-huh.
And...
But it looks like there's some bad seats, but there's no bad seats.
Yeah, like
no bad seats at a Phish show.
We got like really good seats.
That was the other thing. Me and Oliver had talked about previously, like, where do we want to sit at our first
and
show?
then we said like because we were watching live Phish and we said like the S sort of or V.
Yeah.
In that section, and then we got about that spot on live Phish thing.
Yeah, so
it says live Phish on there.
So when you're watching on live Phish, like where they have the words live Phish on the center, we kind of center stage so we could see all of Chris Kuroda's lights and the full band, the full experience. And we were able to get seats like
good,
really
like,
good,
almost close to that.
Yeah, dead center pretty much. It was like
pretty, not like too low, but not too high.
Yeah,
I was like good.
So it was a great first show experience all the way around.
Yeah, I can't imagine, and hearing Oliver even have fond memories of the drive to the show.
Yeah.
Right, as a dad, like that's got to feel great, right? Because it wasn't just like the birthday present, the ticket. I'll see you after the show, Dad. It was a great joint experience for the both of you. It sounds like so. And what's so cool is that like that's just the first.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like these guys, we're very lucky to be a fan base who has a band that still produces at a high level.
Absolutely.
And make it worthwhile to go out of your way to see them or spend the time to do a podcast about them or, 3 hours when you're in fourth grade to listen to a whole concert. That's hard. Like that's not an easy thing to do, period. Not as a young man or an adult. It's just getting anybody to sit down and listen to a concert that you weren't at sometimes is odd to people. Right. Yeah. And we talked about that with this band. You alluded to it. It's come up as a theme on this podcast, which is like, no matter when you get to them, you feel like you missed something.
Very true.
Yeah.
No matter what year. And I keep telling this to the people like yourselves who just got, I'm like, no, I promise you, in 1993, I felt like I had missed something, right? Yep. Like this thing was already bigger than me by then. And people are like, how could that be? And you're like, because people saw them before me.
That's right.
But now where the second part of the rewarding part of the podcast has been this, hey, listen to these shows part, right? And now I get to hear how consistent the excellence is of the band. And it really is something that where if they're in Huntsville one night or Dayton, Ohio the next, and New York, the Garden, you're guaranteed a quality experience. And I don't know if there's anybody doing it better.
I've not heard anybody do it better. And like you said, the consistency of the excellence of the band, you can hear. I mean, everyone's going to have an off night, but when you step back and you look at the whole picture, I mean, I don't know of anybody else that is doing it at that level night after night.
I agree. Every time I see them, I that's exactly what I say. Is there, I don't know if there's anybody in America musically doing this, maybe a Broadway show, with those type of folks, but not a musical act that I'm familiar with yet. So we got to that show, and that's amazing that you got that off the bell. How familiar are you with this early era Phish? I know you're still new in your experience. You started with the studio, so you know that part, but that 1988 to 1996 era.
You want to go first?
I want to see what you got to say.
So I am not very familiar with this early stage of Phish's career. I mean, live studio albums we listened to, but I think the earliest I've listened to with any consistency would probably be 94, but that's only been a handful of shows. Sure. And I've gone back and listened to some of their earliest, like early 80s stuff, but that's just like, it was for the novelty of it, just to say, oh, listen, this is like one of their first shows in 1983 or whatever.
The curiosity.
Yeah, but not like, I'm going to go back and listen to this and really kind of dig into it. So really, I wouldn't say I'm familiar at all with 88 to 96. Oliver?
You said it all.
You said it all. All right. Well, Oliver, I think that, the perspective that you're going to be able to bring to this, I think better than myself for sure. And maybe Bobby, is that like this year, this show, or this 92 show we're going to talk about, they cover a little bit of all the albums, right? You see a little bit. I think that's one of my notes, is that they're giving a taste of all of it, kind of showing everything they can do. So I'm looking forward to hearing your opinion on, the comparisons to what that era sounds like to your ears versus what they brought from the studio perspective too. So that's good. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No.
I was going to say this, listening back to 1992, which we're talking about, you can hear how excited they still are, even after being a band for almost 10 years at this point, technically. And they're still just super excited. And they're, this show it's like a good sampler of kind of what all they can do. And so I was really pumped to get to listen to it.
That's great. So what do you guys like best about the Phish scene now? About, the concert experience? What was the best takeaway that you both had?
Oliver, I think, may have a slightly different answer, but I think we're kind of on the same page. Or the thing we've talked about most is just how welcoming everyone was.
Yeah.
That we sat around, that we got to talk to.
And like everybody understood.
Yeah.
Like that it was our first show, and like that we're still kind of new. And like the best thing that was there, like the best thing that happened, is they played like songs that we actually knew.
Yeah.
And except for because
With a couple of debuts, yeah.
Yeah, but it was just awesome to see that.
And
I know.
And I think it's really nice to hear that, there's probably not a lot of situations in this world that we put ourselves in where we're new to something and we feel so welcome when we start.
Yeah. Completely agree.
That's such a great experience to have versus feeling boxed out of the experience.
Yeah. I think obviously when you look at Phish's catalog, it's daunting. You don't know where to jump in to start listening. Like it's a lot. And so to be welcomed at our first show, and even like for me, doing all the social media for our podcast, like just the people that want to connect and like that'll comment or they'll send us a message and, hey, check out this show, or have you ever listened to, this particular venue, like whatever, has been super kind. And we really appreciate that as newer fans, that people are like kind of giving us some breadcrumbs on what to check out next, to know where to go.
Yeah, I think that it's great that the way you phrase that, because that kind of, my next question was about what's most overwhelming, but you kind of answered that with that answer. And I think I was trying to think of like an analogy that, where it's something that has, where you show kind of an interest, and then when you go into it, it's way more intricate and way more difficult. And for some reason, the analogy that's popping in my head is Dungeons and Dragons right now, and I don't know why. But it's just kind of like, oh, that looks interesting to me. But there's no half-hour immersion of Dungeons and Dragons.
Sure.
You're like, oh, to get the whole thing, you're gonna need to be here for a couple of years, and you're gonna learn you gotta learn how to read these books and do this thing. You're like, oh, there's gonna be a lot going into this. So, I think having that Sherpa, like you mentioned, to take us through the process is huge.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why I started this, is because, I don't know, didn't necessarily feel that way in 93 getting into the Dead, where people were willing to share, hey, here's a tape, check this out. It felt a lot more formidable versus now, where, gosh, to have it all at your fingertips technology wise, getting into this band is fantastic.
Yeah, it's a great time to be a fan because of the advent of technology and having it all there.
Oh, it's that's overwhelming to me as an older person. That's overwhelming. Is where you're like, where do you even start now with all this stuff? You know, the video. You know, even talking to Isaac that time, he's like, oh, I listened to it on YouTube, and I was like, I didn't even know it was on YouTube. Like, I just go to re-listen.
Yep.
So I have these questions that I prepared that I feel kind of encapsulate the conversations that happen when you go to your show, you know, your first shows or your 100th show or your 200th show. That when you start talking to the folks around you or hanging out in the parking lot or in between sets that come up. So I'll ask the question, and then I'm assuming there's going to be multiple answers here. You know, maybe you shared some same answers, but we'll start with the first one, which is, what was the first Phish song you ever heard?
You want to go first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Bouncing around the room.
Good one. Little earworm.
A live one.
A live one. Oh, the live one, even better. So it wasn't even the Lawn Boy version. It was live.
Yeah.
Okay, good. What about you, Bobby?
For me, it was Phry from Billy Breathes.
You weren't alone on that. I think someone else's first experience was that I spoke to recently.
That was my first. Well, let me say this, because I always have to preface. That was the first time I actually listened to a Phish song, was listening to Phry from Billy Breathes. But there was at some point in the early 2000s, maybe 99, 2000, it was either Austin City Limits that they played.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I just came across it on TV. But it didn't catch me enough to like really stick around and watch the whole thing. But I remember seeing, and I won't even say it was like the Farmhouse logo.
Probably. That makes sense.
It could have been a late night show. You know, I'm not sure.
No, I believe they did Austin City Limits right around that time. Farmhouse came out right around that time. That timeline makes complete sense.
So I heard something on that, because I do remember some of the comments about it or something was, you know, their drummer wears a dress, you know. But it didn't really catch me at the time. But then later on, about 4 years later, listening to Billy Breathes, and it got me. So.
And then the next one I know, the first show attended, we covered, because I should just change that to. I'm going to change this question going forward to top Oliver's first show experience until someone does, but I don't think we're going to get there. So I'm going to have to assume for the next one too, it's the same answer though. That was the favorite show you attended. Now, Bobby, you got two to choose from, but I'm going to assume the experience with Oliver had to outweigh whatever happened that second show.
Right. So I went on 7-Eleven. That was our first show. And then I went back on 7-12.
Okay.
And so
The first.
I look at them completely differently,
Yeah.
because the first show was our show together.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm looking at that show because of the nostalgia of the memories that we're creating together, experiencing it for the first time. And then the second night, it was more like my night. I got to experience it through my own eyes and ears. You know what I'm saying? So they are two vastly different experiences with the same band on just 2 consecutive nights. But yeah.
Yeah, your lens has changed, right? And I think that's the beauty of why people go see this band every night, right? If they had the opportunity to, because it's a different experience every night. It's when your headspace is different because responsibilities are different night to night. It just allows for a different experience. So that's not saying one's better than the other, right? That's the beauty of these shows, is that they're all their own experiences.
It's just different. Yeah.
What's the song that you can't wait, whether the next time you see them, for them to play live?
Simple.
Ooh.
Simple. That's a good one. Oh, that's a good one. That's a fun song live. That's a lot of fun.
I would really like to hear The Lizards.
Also very good live.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of impartial. I'm not gonna say there's bad versions of it, right? Like, but these are beautiful songs, to hear in person.
I think
that's a good one. The guitar outro. I was just talking to somebody the other day about that, and that's just some of the most beautiful stuff he's ever written.
Yep.
Now, Bobby, you're probably going to answer this, and Oliver, you might have an opinion on it, so shout it out, right? Is there a live show you've listened to that you find yourself like listening to more frequently or recommending to others?
So for me, because I was looking back over the shows I've listened to, and the ones I've listened to the most are from 2017 or 2012 Dicks. I think it was. I have to check my notes, but it was from Dicks, and I think it was 2012. Now that I'm second guessing myself, let me look it up real quick. Yeah, 2012 Dicks, and my favorite of those, because there was 4 nights, was the first night. So that would have been 8/31/2012 is the live show I've listened to probably the most. It's a real fun night. That was the night that they do You Enjoy Myself, and part of the vocal jam is everyone going around, they're just saying, Trey loves dicks, Mike loves dicks. It's
That
wild.
was the I think that was the first my first episode. I believe that was the show Joseph recommended.
Yeah.
I have to go back, but yeah, and Dick's came up again. Like, I have to get out there to see them there, because they don't disappoint. It seems like every time they go out there.
Seems like every time they go out there, they're just they
new
playing there. Just something fun about it for them.
Oliver, you got an opinion on anything?
You have a favorite live show?
Yours.
Yours?
Yeah. Have you gone back and listened to it? The one you were at?
Especially Say Too Many Santos.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got a good version of that one for you?
It was fun. And we got that Oblivion debut.
Oh, so debuts are always nice too.
Yeah. There was a lot of good songs at our first show.
Haley's Comet, that was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Comet, you said?
Yep.
Because we listened before.
We did.
Which was cool.
You heard it on the car on the way in, is that what you said? Very, like, it's almost like it's destined to happen sometimes, right? And you were talking about, you mentioned it, Oliver, with Divided Sky, right? And I feel like that, for some reason, is a song that I'll catch either driving, or sitting out on the lawn at a concert, and you're like, oh shoot, is that happening right now? Like, is this manifesting in its way, or is my brain just playing, like when you see shapes in the clouds, like, is my brain just playing tricks on me? It sounded like you kind of had a similar experience to that on the drive in.
Yeah, and the fun thing about that is we bet that they were gonna play that, and it actually happened.
Yeah. There was no money on the bet. It was just
well, everybody won. You got it. It's a win-win bet. It's one of those heads I win, tails you lose, right? It's everybody wins on that bet. So that's great that translated over, that experience. What's the song that you're like can't get out of your head right now?
Say It To Me Santos.
Yeah. That's a fun one. This Is What Space Smells Like. Yeah. For me, it kind of varies, day to day, either what I've heard or a version, but probably, man, that's tough.
I know, because there's like thousands of Phish songs.
Yeah, like I said, it varies day to day.
Well, that's why I said today. That's why right now is what's going through it right now, because I know I'll never lock you into this answer forever, because that's going to change maybe in a couple hours.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
So my current one that I can't get enough of is Yem.
Specific version, or just like you're bouncing around listening to different ones?
No, I would have to say, and I texted a friend about this because of prepping for this show, listening to 92, and I told him, I said, this has got to be currently one of my top 5 Yems that I've heard, the one we're talking about today.
It gets crazy. It gets special for sure. Yeah. If I could recommend one to you while you're on a Yem kick, is 12/9/95.
Okay.
Albany, New York. That was I was lucky enough to be there, but that goes down as one of those all-timers. But yeah, while you're on your Yem kick, enjoy one from good old snowy Albany back then in early December.
We'll check that one out.
Ooh, sounds fun.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to insult you, Oliver, but you know what? When I say a cover song, do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah,
Okay, cool. So, do you know any cover songs that Phish does?
I know they did a AC/DC song once.
They did way back. Yeah, yeah. Highway to Hell, right?
Yeah,
Is that your favorite cover song that you've heard them do?
that's like the only one I've heard them do.
Well, then
Well,
that's your favorite for sure.
to be fair, you have heard "Roses Are Free,"
Oh yeah,
and that's a cover song.
yeah.
You might not have known that was a cover song.
Oh,
It is.
I didn't know either until I found out, so don't feel bad.
Yeah.
It sounds like it should be a Phish song, right?
It does.
Yeah. So
And
would
I've
you?
gone back. I've listened to Wayne's version. I prefer Fish's.
I mean, it's funny. I was talking to somebody the other day. They said that we were. I think the cover was "Ride Sally Ride," "Ride Captain
Yeah.
Ride," and I was like, "Well, do you like the song?" They're like, "I like the Phish cover version of the song. Like, I don't know if I like the original, but I like the." So will you Roses Are Free and Highway to Hell? If you had to choose one, Oliver, which one would it be?
Highway to Hell.
Yeah.
Highway to Hell, yeah, they get fun with that one for sure. How about you, Bobby?
Favorite cover. I do like. No, I'm not gonna say "Roses Are Free." We've been listening to that for some stuff we're doing, but my favorite cover is I'm blanking on it now. Let me look at my notes here. It's got yeah. I like what's it? You may have to edit these pauses out.
We're humans. I'm not. This isn't iHeartRadio. This is just us talking.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, this is all free. You can wait for the pauses. This is free.
Let's see. I'll tell you what, the one I've been listening to it's growing on me more and more. There's that Ride Captain Ride, is Jesus Left Chicago.
Yeah, there's a good one on the Slip Stitch and Pass too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Because we've been listening to that album as well. But that's probably the one that's growing on me more. I think it's because it's such a different style than the rest of kind of what Phish does.
Sure.
It's kind of it kind of comes out of left field in a good way.
Yeah, I think, I don't think people would put a straight line from ZZ Top to Phish.
Yeah.
Right.
Fair.
So when you hear LaGrange or Jesus Left Chicago or something like that, right? Like I think it's people go, oh, okay, this is different, and really swampy bluesy song, that Texas blues sound that ZZ Top was so good with. I think it's something that you don't expect four guys from Vermont. It's kind of like the funk. You don't expect four guys from Vermont to be able to do that.
Very true.
So we were just talking about You Enjoy Myself. So we have the intro to You Enjoy Myself to break down those four words, and they're kind of all delivered in a very different way. So in that song, what's your favorite part of that song? Boy, man, God, or shit?
Oliver?
Boy.
Yeah.
The way it's delivered, the way it comes in there.
Yeah,
I like that too.
I think because we were talking about this week about this question. My first answer wants to be boy, just because of that lead up into it, that tension, that build, and then yelling, and then boy, that release. But after listening to several yams here lately, I think God is probably mine, because there's just so much wrapped up. Each word has so much that's so layered, right? But God, it's just like it could be frustration, it could be elation, it could be
Relief.
a relief. Yeah. So I feel like for me it's God, but I do boys is a good one.
Yeah.
And much like your favorite song, listen, this will change tomorrow, right? It depends on the version you hear and what you hear and what you're in the mood for, what your lens is, as we talked about earlier for that. So let's jump into this show.
Yes.
We're gonna go into talk about a really unique Phish experience for definitely some of the people listening, but even throughout their history, this is a unique experience for a couple of reasons. Why I chose it was there was an amazing soundboard that circulated in the early 90s of it. It also used to fit on, I was explaining to Oliver about bootlegs and tapes and things he'll never have to worry about. But this fit perfectly on one tape back in the early 90s. So that was always a benefit. And the show we're going to break down is July 25th, 1992 at the Stowe Performing Arts Center in Stowe, Vermont. And, the first unique part about this show is Phish is playing a role that they very, very rarely have played in a 40-year career. And that's an opening act.
Yeah.
I think it might have only happened in 92 for Santana and then maybe the Violent Femmes, I think, in Europe later that summer or something like that. I know they opened for the Violent Femmes at some point. So it's interesting to take a show like this and to highlight a one set show when I've narrowed down this era for 8 years or whatever it is. But to me, and I think to a lot of people at the time, because I talked to my old friends, hey, what were the tapes that we used to listen to all the time, bootleg? And I didn't pick this one. Somebody brought it up and I was like, oh yeah, that's right. So I was really interested for you guys to hear it being new fans, because not only does it show them as a young act, it shows them in collaboration with someone as well.
Yep.
So they're opening for Santana on this tour over the summer, and this one is essentially a hometown show. Stowe is not too far from Burlington, their home base, and you got to imagine that there's definitely some folks in the audience who are familiar with Phish.
Sure.
But I think one of the interesting things to think about with this is that there's a good chunk of people who have no idea who they are.
Right. And so listening to it, which I don't know that I would have on my own gone back and listened to this, knowing they're opening for Santana. It's a one set show, basically. But like you said, it is pretty much a hometown show. And so you can hear it on the recording, which is really great soundboard. There are some people from the beginning who are cheering and wooing and everything. And then it grows throughout the set as more and more people are getting to the show, for Santana. And
that's a good observation. That's a good observation right there. That's nice. I didn't pick up on that until you just said it, and I was like, oh, that is true. Like that, and it follows suit kind of in the set here too.
Yeah, it's like it builds and builds and builds, and obviously we can get to it as we get in there. But I have to think they won over a lot of the crowd as well. You know what I'm saying? So like they gained some new fans in the show in their opening.
100%. Now, Oliver, were you familiar with who Carlos Santana is before this? I know we're getting old. I know, and I'm not looking to put you on the spot, but I didn't think you would. But it's also kind of important too, because he was a pretty big influence on Trey,
right?
And you kind of hear that obviously here. So that's cool, because I did want to kind of hopefully introduce you to something that you weren't aware of, prior to this, because to be honest with you, even though how old your dad thinks I am, Santana is even older than I am. And he was kind of like my parents' music, right? So he was the same era as the Grateful Dead. And here they are. Here's a person who's kind of a steward of that music saying, hey, these guys, they're good, and there's something that Carlos Santana said, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with, he said they're the hose, the band, Phish, right? They can just, the whole crowd gets it, right? And I refer to it as the four-headed monster, whatever you want. But very early on, here's one of the most respected guitarists of his generation saying these guys got the goods, right?
That's awesome.
And I think that's something that I was hoping you heard, Oliver, just even open your right ear, Santana, this new Phish to you. And now I'm laying three new musicians on top of it. So, that observation about them winning hearts and minds, though, I think, mirrors exactly what you said about people showing up. Right. And I think that's something to think about too, with this band being an opener for somebody.
It's so wild to think about Phish as being an opening act for somebody else, because like you said, they've been the show for so long, and it's so many of our mindsets, it's you're going to the Phish show, there's not going to be an opening band, it's just Phish for 3 hours, melting.
And that blows people's minds. Like, it blows other people's minds. Like, who's opening? You're like, nobody. They would get booed off the stage. Like, nobody's gonna open for that. What are you, crazy? Like, you can't let anybody on there. Like,
right.
Nobody's gonna want to go on after him. It's like after, like, was it Clapton or Pete Townsend who wouldn't go on after Hendrix? Like, you're not going on after that. No way.
Yeah,
so I think this puts them in an interesting light.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what we were talking about, Oliver, with your perspective here, with the albums, what's interesting is they open up with, talking about playing in front of people you don't know. And they're like, yeah, we're going to play something that's not on any albums. How do you think about that? Like, if that's not the most Phish thing ever about either you get it or you don't, to me, this pretty much sums up who they are, the punk nature of who they are to a T.
So when you sent me this as a show, we were going to talk about it, I looked at this set list and I thought, this is what they've chosen for their one set opening for Carlos Santana at this show. And I thought, I would not have picked this as a sampler for like the new fans that'd be in the audience. You know what I'm saying? Like brand new people. This is not the songs I would have picked. I don't know what I would have picked, but it wouldn't have been these. But it's kind of like, we're Phish. This is what we do. Just that, like you said, that punk rock nature. Like, here we are, and we're going to start out with a song that's not on any album, and it's a cover, right? It's an old.
No, that's an original. That's it.
I didn't know. For some reason I was thinking this Runaway Jim was a cover of an old blues artist, but
that's an old Trey or blues artist original. Yeah, no, I think that's that was the first Phish song I ever heard ever. Like, my first experience was hearing them live first, like walking into the arena, and that was so Runaway Jim was what they opened with. That was my first song, so I kind of have that love affair with that song. What did you think of that song? Were you familiar with it, Oliver? Runaway Jim?
Yeah.
Did you like it?
You like Runaway Jim?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fun.
Yeah.
Dude.
It's like old Phish.
Yeah.
Old Phish. That's true. That's very true. But they still play it today, right? It's one of those songs that's still in rotation, like we talked about. It's got that that great kind of audience call and response part with the everybody can kind of play along in that part, and that little story that Bobby mentions about the poor dog who busts out of town, and hopefully you see him again, right?
Takes all his money.
That's it. Gets the heck out. Now they get into the first studio song. And what were your thoughts when you heard those opening notes of Foam?
I was pumped. I mean, I saw it on the set list. But so I've been a drummer like my whole life. And so the way Fishman plays, I was talking to a guy at the second night or my second concert. He was a musician, and I said, I don't understand how Fishman can play like he's got 8 arms, but it's just one person. It's like there's so much going on, but he just stays in the pocket, but yet he's able to do so much with the 4 limbs that he has. And so hearing him play on this, just with that syncopation, and they're opening for Santana, which he's got a drummer and a percussionist who joined them later on in this. And I think in some ways, I feel like they were playing to the crowd. You know what I'm saying? Like, because he's able to do all because of his jazz background, he's able to play some of this stuff. But I was really pumped, and it's a great version of Foam.
Now, when you say play to the crowd, do you mean like trying to go for a sound that a Santana audience would be kind of familiar with or open to?
So, with all their Latin percussion and everything, the way he's playing with the cowbell and the syncopation of the drums there, I feel like now listening to the show, I can see where they would have picked Foam as to say, hey, this is something y'all might like after Runaway Jim, which you might,
right.
But this is something that you might, it's more comfortable for what your style, you're here to hear Santana. This is some of that with the syncopation. And
I have one question for you.
Yeah.
What animal do you think each band member, like sea animal would be?
All right, let me just make sure I got that right. What sea animal?
Yeah.
It has to be a sea animal, right? For each band member.
Yeah.
All right. Can I give my answer at the end, or I have to give it to you on the spot?
I don't really care.
All right, as we talk, I'll think, and then I'll write my answers down, and then I'll give it to you before we get off.
But is that why you thought of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I got why you got that. So I got that. I've already started writing down one answer. So we're good there. Actually, now I got two. So and I think you're right there, and I think that's part of being an opening act, right? Is they're not there to see you for the most part. I mean, I have gone to concerts for the opening act and left before the headliner, but like that's not normal behavior of a human. But I also think when you have this synergy between Santana and Phish as bands and an audience, and especially at this point in Santana's career, where this is before the resurgence with Rob Thomas. This is, kind of like the summer tour, right? Like you're the summer mountain tour. You're only doing ski resorts for 2,000 people. I think, they need to kind of win some people over. It's going to get awkward, not interesting, and that's not who they are, right? Because I think part of what you said earlier is like true, the music is serious as hell, but we are not.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's where that mindset, much like an improvisational comedian or stand-up comedian, you're going to be like, oh, you don't like that? Watch what I can do over here and see how much you don't like it, right? And like try to either go get them or you're going to make them miserable. And I think that's where, I had notes. My note here was excellent and energetic.
Oh, for sure.
Just so precision on point. And that's kind of an annoying redundancy of going back to some of these old shows, because unlike today, where you mentioned it earlier about a mistake leads to other greatness, or giving yourself enough grace in a window that if you make a mistake, you can do something else with it, versus like we have to be perfect or else we're in trouble.
Right.
And this foam is perfect, right? It's energetic, it's excellent, but it's perfect. Like there's just no there's no flaws in it. And this era is kind of like that because they're practicing so much. They're so in sync that that's what happens every time.
Yeah.
So they win them over with a foam.
Yeah.
Right. And then like back to your Runaway Jim analogy, it's like, okay, now we're going to go back to being a little weird. Here's Sparkle.
Yeah. Like I said, this set list is not one I would have picked to try to win over an audience. But I mean, Sparkle is one of those songs, like I said, it's fun, it's silly. And to me, it encapsulates, because there is such precision and musicianship that they have to be able to play this. And as like it speeds up at the end, like to be able to stay together and they're singing all the different parts, to be able to do all that. And they're like, hey, this is one of our songs. You're going to like it or you don't.
Exactly.
Albert,
what did you think of this versus the studio version of Sparkle?
It's way better.
You think so?
Yeah.
The live version's way better, or the studio version?
Live version.
Interesting. I would have thought you'd like the studio better.
I like that one.
What was the difference?
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the beauty of this, right? It hits you differently. Go what were you gonna say?
I don't know. I was like, oh yeah, the way that they came from foam into sparkle, it was like really cool because they went back to a funny song and like being weird, like being true fish.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what you see. You said it way better than your dad and I were trying to say right there, and you succinctly said it in 2 words, right? Get back to being fish.
That's why.
And unapologetic fish. And
Yep.
now, if I remember correctly from listening to your podcast, now again, this may have changed, but was Stash one of your favorites for a while,
Yeah,
Oliver? Okay, is it still up there, or have you moved on to new favorites?
it's still up there.
Yeah.
Cool, because I really like this version of Stash.
Yeah.
Me too.
A little longer than the studio, and that usually is going to happen sometimes, right? With the live ones, they're going to run a little longer.
But I think this one, I really love this version of Stash. But there again, it's still that funny fish because they're going to bring in what's the line we always talk about? Smegma dogmatogram, fish market stew. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, the audience is going to be super intrigued, or they're going to be like, what's happening?
Gotta go.
Yeah. Where am I? Why am I watching this? So, but I think this entire set is what you said earlier, is just they're playing so well. They're so practiced that this is one of the top stashes in my list now. So
great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Because we think at this point, Oliver, 1992, how many studio albums do they have at this point? What are we looking at? Junta?
Wait, so they
Junta,
Junta?
Rift.
Nectar? Nectar's not out yet?
Hoist.
Hoist 94.
Yeah,
Because what I'm looking at here, even though we have a very small set list, right? We're talking about 2, 4, 8 songs. Of those 8 songs, 1, 2, 3 do not appear on any album ever, which is insane. So I'm trying to think, of the albums that are, of the songs that are left, are these albums already out? You know what I mean? Like, so is Rift out at this point, July of 92? I don't think so, right?
Yeah, so they had Junta, Long Boy, Pitcher Nectar, and then Rift wasn't out yet.
So we're getting 2 new songs here. That's great. And then only, 2 songs off of existing. Elektra must have loved them back in the day. Gosh. Their record company must have been like, what are you doing? Like, you're playing, nothing is even on any of these records they can buy.
Yeah.
So that's Stash. What was your thoughts about that one, Oliver? Did you have any takeaways from Stash? Because I know that was a favorite song of yours.
Yeah, I had a few. It was just like, it was way faster, I think. And I felt like
I think,
yeah, that's all I gotta say.
No, faster is true. I think you're going to see that a lot of times when you start comparing your studios to your lives, right? I think energy, nerves probably get into it a little bit, but I think that song is a little bit slower on the album. I haven't listened to the album in a long time, but I think it's a little bit slower maybe on that one.
it is.
Like Chalk Dust, where they slowed it down a little bit.
That's what I told Oliver previously about, like, 90s era Phish, is a lot of their stuff is just blazing fast.
Yeah.
Like,
that's what I got into. That's what attracted me, Oliver, to the band, was that I had never seen anything like that before. I had never seen something like a song like Sparkle, or even the next song Rift, right? Like, where you think this thing is going to come apart at any given time.
Yes.
And you think that, like, it's not composed, but it's all composed, right? And it blew my mind how fast they could play, and I'd never really heard a piano so, like, rock driven before. And So yeah, that's a really good observation about the speed, because I think, and you felt this probably, it sounds like at your concert, it's a little different in person,
Mhm.
right? There's like this energy that exists when you have a group of people together that like doesn't exist when it's just two people listening to a show or an album, right? People that yell that greets the band every time those lights come on, right? That's the best thing ever. That's what keeps everybody coming back. So good observation there. That's pretty good, especially for one of your favorite songs. And Bob, you said you think that's one of your favorite versions of that now?
I do. It's definitely ranked up there. I don't know if one of my friends, he's all about lists and we're top 10 stuff like that, and it's always hard for me to rank stuff like that, but it's definitely one of my favorite ones.
I think there's value to it as long as you're open to changing it.
Oh, for sure.
Right? Like if you're like open to being like, no, this is only these, and it's like, well, that's just a list then. And then the so I agree with you there. Rift. So we get another song that's not on an album, another one that's played pretty fast. What were your thoughts there?
Go ahead.
I don't know. It's like with the drums and like the guitar, and the piano.
Oh yeah,
I like all of it. It's good.
it's
Four-headed monster.
Yeah, it's funny to me because they're opening with Runaway Jim, this kind of country-ish ballad, about a dog.
Yeah.
And then they hit you with Sparkle, which kind of has that bluegrass kind of feel to it. And then Stash, which is just rock with really weird lyrics.
Like a salsa type of vibe.
It's always got that kind of salsa vibe. And then they go back into Rift, which is, using train horn harmony, like a kind of like a barbershop quartet type stuff with this country-ish feel to it. And then it speeds up. I mean, like it's such a weird set list, but they're playing it so well that you can't not like it.
And that would be interesting. That's a fascinating observation there, because like what I would love to do is find somebody who had never heard them but went to that Santana show.
Yeah.
Right. It was like, yeah, I'm a huge Phish fan now.
They won me.
Okay. Yeah. What was it? Was it the riff? Tell us. What was it that got you? And then the part of the show that kicks off here, and now obviously when I go back and look at this is why it's circulated so much, besides the quality of it. But the next three songs, and what's here's another interesting question for somebody who was at that show, is that like I'm wondering if they just left the stage and then like the members of Santana stayed and just the rest of the band came on, because it kind of just felt that way a little bit.
Yep.
But the song that you've been stuck on lately, here's an interesting version that you don't get every day.
Yeah.
But a 16-minute "You Enjoy Myself," which is accompanied by Carlos Santana, Carl Palazzo, and someone else from Santana, right? So you get three people on stage with them at the same time. It was a Raul Racao. So
yeah,
I had the fortunate luck to see Phish play with just Carl Palazzo in Hartford, I think in '96. Cool. He played like 4 or 5 shows with them. Like we showed up that night and there was 2 drum sets on stage. Like, oh, whoa, what's happening here? But this is why I think this circulated so much, right? Mm-hmm. This is Phish, not only at their improvisational best, but also like their sharing open best.
Yep. That's one of the notes I had was, you can hear like the synergy that happens when Santana comes out and him and Trey are doing twin lead, like improv stuff, and they're just trading off, and then you've got 3 percussionists, Carl and Raul, and then Fishman, and they're just like gelling so well. It's like I said, it's probably my top 5 favorite Yam, and just the feel of it the when Santana's group gets on there with them, it just changes the whole feel of Yim, but not in any way a negative way. You know, it's not like, well, this isn't your normal Yim. Well, no, it's not, but it's in some ways it's so much better because they bring their flavor into it, and Phish just like, all right, this is where we're going now. We're just having fun playing with these three extra musicians,
Yeah.
and it's so good. It's so much fun.
And I think you hit a bunch of buttons right there. One being, that the synergistic sound between the two. But it goes right back to what you were talking about earlier about, hey, this crowd's open to this, right? So now they come out and make Yem something it's not, to your point, it's something it's normal not, but it does sound very Santana-esque in its jam, right? Like with that vibe to it. The big note I had here, and I think it's true probably from this moment on, is the 9-minute mark of that Yem for the rest of the show becomes a different concert.
Yep.
From what we just talked about, those songs that we're running down the list of, like, wow, this is an interesting way to try to win over a crowd. This is almost like they know they won the crowd, and they're like, hey, watch, we're gonna play now 2 songs that aren't any other albums right after this.
Yep.
And but from that 9-minute mark on, when the duality of the guitars really shine,
it's so good.
did you go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna say it's one of those things, like, because Trey and Santana's tone, their guitar tones are similar, but they're different enough and their styles are different enough that you can tell when Carlos is playing and when Trey's playing. But they're close enough together that when they play together, like with their twin lead harmonies and stuff, it's beautiful. It's, like I said, it's got that synergy, but it's just beautiful music.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you just that question about their tones, because they're very similar. Trey's tone is very similar to his in that era of Phish, right? And that's, you're always going to sound like your idols in some way.
Sure.
That's just how it all works, right?
Yeah.
And
That's how you start. I want to sound like this person.
Yeah, I love what that person does. That's what inspired me to do this. And
Yep.
I think that's where you hear that a little bit, right? And I think that comes out in the next 2 choices of songs, right? In a way, is they take that vibe that you said that changes once the 3 members of Santana take the stage and make it a more, very lack of a better word, Santana friendly sound to the audience, right? Because to your point now, they're probably close to where the most people are going to be for the night. Everybody's kind of into the show at this point. But then they come out of there with a llama that I only have one word next to it, and it's monster.
Absolutely. It's so fast, so clean. And I mean, it's like there was no they didn't take the foot off the gas after the Yim. How
Right.
It's like we're shifting to 3rd gear now. We're really going. I mean, they don't even finish. Like, I think Phish.net says, it doesn't say that it was unfinished. It says Yim was unfinished, but I don't even think they really sang all of Llama.
No, I think they were really excited to just get back into the space they created, in Yem with the guys on stage. I think you hit that right on the head there. I don't think it was about the lyrics at any point, right? It was just like, hey, what tonalities do we think would fit really well with all of our sound right now? That's it.
You can hear Trey probably talking to Carlos at the beginning, where he's like, they're playing the intro, and he's like, something, I couldn't really understand it, but it says something like, y'all come in after the intro, is what I'm assuming he's saying, like kind of giving them where to come in and when to start jamming,
And that's the last note he has to give him, right?
Yeah.
Like that's it. Just start here, and then we'll follow you from there.
We got it.
Were you familiar with Llama?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you like that one?
Yes.
But
yeah, me too. That's a good
but
one.
do you like fast or slow Llama?
Slow.
That's your preference. Good. Oh, really? Good for you. It's a good one. I heard I was lucky enough last summer to hear Slow Maze live, which is that was at Deer Creek last summer. And so I think it's the only time they've played it. It was in the Encore. So it was like a really interesting place for it, and it's a slow maze, but Yeah, very unique. That's the beauty of these guys. And then, you know, this Monster Llama, this last little, I think it's maybe 20 minutes of music, maybe a little bit more, 25 minutes of music. Just keeps going. And I think to the lyrics point of what you said, this cover, you know, they go into Funky Bitch with this is another cover, but like, I think it's more about what tonality do we want to stay with for jamming.
And I love the way Mike is singing this.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, he's singing from his toes when he's singing this song. It's just fun because a lot of times when Mike is singing, reserved is not the right word, but like in this one, like he's got that growl in his voice and he's kind of screaming a little bit. You know, just
contained. He's usually a little contained.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. He is more contained, but this, I mean, he's just going for it. You know, the arena or wherever they're at, this venue's like pretty well filled up by now, you'd have to think. And he's just going for it. It's fun.
The beauty of these venues on the East Coast and the Northeast where this is these are all at the bottom of a ski mountain.
Oh,
so the stage is like the mountains here, like you would ski down here, and the stage is just at the bottom. So like in the summer, everybody's just like up hanging out on the mountain looking down, you know, on the stage. So it's like perfect setting for summer, much like you were talking about with your show, guys, like in that summer months. This is the middle of July, hanging out. The band's probably, I mean, Phish probably got on the stage at 6, you know, if Santana's at 7, right? So this is like dinner time. They're out on stage.
That's cool.
And my note here was just that at that 4-minute mark of Funky Bitch, when Trey and Carlos go back and forth doing their duel, it brought me right back to like the early 90s again, of like being in my car, like listening to that tape and that back and forth, because the energy, and that's some of the great stuff over this podcast thing has been like, wow, this stuff stands up 30 plus years later. This is still good Phish, right? It's not new Phish. It's not what we're into now, but like, wow, this is a completely different animal, and it's really on point.
Yeah, completely.
So is this a show that you guys would recommend to a new fan of the band?
You think so?
Definitely.
All right. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, I think I would, but there would be a caveat to it. You know,
sure.
Because it's not just Phish.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're getting to hear Phish with some of the members and with Carlos Santana. So like, but yeah, I would definitely recommend this to someone. Hey, it's an hour. You know what I'm saying? So you've got It's easily digestible than a 3-hour, you know, Tweezer Fest show or something. So it's a little more digestible, and it's got a little bit of everything. It's a sampler platter.
And that's something that we talked about a little bit, but you know, that's a great way to wrap that up, is that it's a sampler platter, right? It's a little bit of everything of what Phish had to offer at the time, but all played incredibly well, and you know, really leaving the improvisational moments for when the members of Santana were on the stage, and really knocking out of the park those, you know, like we talked about, songs that aren't on albums, songs that are albums, cover songs, whatever it was they're playing at that time. So great observation there with the, you know, the variety of showing people all the cards when you're an opening act. So now I'm going to answer your question, Oliver. The sea animals of Phish. So I'm going to agree with Bobby that an octopus is John Fishman. There is no doubt. For Mike, I had an eel.
Ooh, that's good.
I imagine like a real serious, straightforward kind of like.
Yep, I can see it.
For Paige, I had a clam. Right, because he's got all that stuff around and kind of opens his arm, you know, open up and all around and playing all those things.
Yeah, I like it.
And then the only one I for Trey, and I kind of bounced one in my head, was a dolphin. And why I did that was because like they're kind of like a puppy, like they're fun, energetic, all over the place. You know, they get along with everybody. They kind of play well with, you know, in the sandbox with everybody else. Nobody's except for sharks, but whatever. There's no sharks in this Phish thing. So that's a really cool question. I can 100% tell you no one has ever asked me that question before. So thank you. I appreciate that. Anytime I can get a first out of a Phish experience for 30 years in, that's a good day. So I appreciate this. Now I asked you guys to do one more step in this homework, and we talked about this before we started recording. So being that there are 2 of you, you get to have two answers. So I'm really fortunate enough now to get two great recommendations from you guys on shows I should be listening to post 2011. So who wants to go first? Who wants to give me their recommendation first? Oliver? All right.
7/11/2023.
7/11/23. Now, do I get a handshake with Trey before listening to it?
Probably not.
All right. I'll just have to live vicariously through you, right? This was your first show?
Mm.
Okay. Huntsville, Alabama. 7/11/23. I'm in on that one. Okay, so I don't get the handshake, but I get the show. That's fair.
But that show does have a monster
Oblivion.
debut of Oblivion and a monster 5-song encore.
Oh, yeah. They
So-
had play Iculus.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Were you still awake? Because I don't know if I would have been on a 5-song encore. I'm getting old, man. That's what me and you have in common, Oliver. We're both in bed by 11. That's the
That
difference.
does,
Yeah, we went to Sapa for Easter. I forgot.
yeah.
I feel you. I listen to encores as I'm leaving, as I walk out. You walk out slow, and you can listen to the whole thing.
Right.
It was 12 a.m.
It was
It's late, man. It's late. I don't know how those guys do it. This last Dayton show I saw, it was after it was 12:30, and they're still on stage, and I'm like, it's Tuesday. This is not a Friday or Saturday night. We got stuff to do in the morning.
right. Yeah.
And what about you, Bobby?
So I'm going to give you my second show, 7/12/2023.
All right. I'm getting the Huntsville tour.
That's right.
All right.
The Huntsville run.
I'm looking forward to that. I haven't a little Alabama getaway.
That's right.
Man. So I look forward to that. I've only heard positive things about that space down there, that new arena. So it's kind of lucky you guys. That's your home turf. And you get to see what comes through there. So
We do count ourselves lucky.
oh heck yeah! Especially when the drive-in seems to be some of the fun part, right, Oliver? You enjoy that commute to the show. That's for sure. But thank you guys so much. I really enjoy your podcast. I really enjoy the tact you're taking. Keep doing what you're doing, right? The Helping Friendly book keeps getting bigger and bigger every year. They're going to keep adding shows. So it's always going to be overwhelming. There's always going to be new stuff to listen to. There's always going to be new studio albums and side projects and bands that they rename that are actually them and all the stuff, right? So keep doing what you're doing. You guys are really, like I said before we came on, have been an inspiration to me to get this thing going off the ground. And I do appreciate that, and hearing you guys do it and how much fun you bring to every episode comes through. So if anybody's listening to this and haven't heard you guys, you got to check out them, because they will keep you not only informed of the viewpoint from a new fan, but also personally speaking, from my point of view, keep you in that magic that coming through a young person's eyes when you find something new. So thank you both for your time today. I much appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us. And I appreciate your podcast because, like I said, we all need a Phish Sherpa, someone to kind of help us learn about some of these earlier shows that were formational for us for where we are today. And so I love this concept, and I really appreciate you having us on.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I didn't know where you were pointing at me, so I was like, huh?
Yeah.
No, I think I might change the name of my podcast now to the Phish Sherpa. I love it. I'm going to be Bill the Phish. I'm your Phish Sherpa. That's how I'm going to introduce myself on the podcast going forward. All right, Oliver, you're shaking your head. Yes, I have to do that. So if you hear that on your podcast, it's because of you.
That's awesome.
Guys, I look forward to all that you guys have in front of you. Hopefully we cross paths at some point in the future at the Phish podcasting convention or a concert. I'm just kidding, Oliver. There's no convention. It was just a joke.
Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah, maybe we just started one. Who knows? We never know. But thank you both, guys. Enjoy the rest of the week. Have a happy Merry Christmas. Enjoy the Happy New Year. And let's hopefully cross paths soon.
Absolutely. We'd love to. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys. Nice meeting you.
My only breath that I have breathed since I was 10. I hope this happens once again.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to be a guest on an upcoming episode or recommend a show for a future podcast, contact me at This Happened Once Before podcast on Facebook, at THOB podcast on Instagram, or at happenedoncebefore@gmail.com.
Once I
Thanks for listening, and I hope this happens once again.
Thoughts from me, my only breath that I have breathed since I was 10. I hope this happens once again.